The news that Triumphs had entered 3 1.9-litre experimental versions of the TR for the 1960 Le Mans International 24-hour sports car race created a lot of excitement. Triumph enthusiasts the world over were hungry for their first sight of the new cars. Their arrival at the circuit was greeted with particular delight by those devotees of the sport who hold that the racing car of today should be the touring car of tomorrow, that the participation at Le Mans of manufacturers who make cars for everyday use on the road is the true key to the continued success of this type of racing. Following their weeks of preparation at the Coventry factory, the Triumph team of engineers and mechanics were as eager for the start as the enthusiasts. For ahead lay the testing time of all their efforts. Le Mans is really a whole series of separate races run simultaneously. And for the outright victory, regardless of class, Ferrari of Italy had no less than 12 V12 3-litres. John Bolster examines their principal rivals, the birdcage Maseratis of the Cameradi USA. Beset by immediate pre-race difficulties, the Lotus team came this year to Le Mans with the odds stacked against them, but determined to repeat their previous successes. And following the inspiration of Briggs Cunningham, America was strongly represented, doing things in a big way as usual with their giant 4.6-litre Chevrolet Corvettes. Driving in the Triumph team was that very experienced man about racing, Les Lester, who likes his comforts. He and his partner from America, Mike Rothschild, making his first appearance at Le Mans, discussed the controversial windscreen regulations, which demanded a minimum height of almost 11 inches, and all the drivers agreed with the ban on that one. By the afternoon of Saturday, June the 25th, the eyes of the motoring world were focused upon the circuit of the South. Strict regulations govern the race, and these are enforced by the officials attached to every pit. Refueling may only be undertaken from the common supply over the counter. Oil and water may only be taken on after 25 consecutive laps, and the seals on the filler caps may only be broken by the officials upon pain of disqualification. It's 1 hour and 5 minutes to the start. Ken Richardson, the Triumph competitions manager, supervises the final preparations. And even to a man of his experience, this is an anxious time, for Le Mans can be won or lost in the pits, and that is his responsibility. The musicians of the United States Air Force are replaced by those of a French military school, but this is probably of no political significance. Drivers Ninian Sanderson and Peter Bolton talk lap times with their manager, while nearby, the Ferrari, privately entered by the North American racing team, is warmed up for the Mexican Rodriguez and the Belgian André Pillet. And there's an awe-inspiring spectacle. The immaculate gendarme, brought in from every corner of central France, advanced to clear the pit area. If you haven't got the right pass, you're out. And you don't have to know the language. The gendarmes herd all before them like sheep. Did someone say sheep? Over 250,000 people jam every vantage point as the seconds tick away towards the start. But Ninian Sanderson knows well what lies ahead. He won this race in 1956 the hard way in the wet, and now only the knife of the starter's flag can cut the tension. There's Leston and Peter Bolton on their marks, and the pack is unleashed. But Bolton, number 29, is in trouble. Agonizing moments and a desperately dangerous situation there in the middle of the road. But Peter Bolton keeps his head, and all is well. Through the first curve and under the Dunlop Bridge, the world's most expensive traffic jam jostles for position. Back in the pits, Harry Webster, the Director of Engineering, is ready with the lap chart. It's all eyes right, and first man round on an electrifying first lap is Maston Gregory with the birdcage Maserati, behind the Ferraris and Jim Clark with the privately entered Aston Martin. Les Leston is the leader of the trials. Balisat, next man up in the car he shares with Marcel Beccard. Managing Director Alec Dick shares the excitement with fellow director Martin Tustin and Ken Richardson. There's the Whitehead Taylor Ferrari, number 15, and number 9 is the Works Ferrari of Phil Hill and Von Trips. There's Keith Balisat again, number 28, and there's Peter Bolton, number 29, now completely recovered from that anxious-making start. The long routine of plotting the race begins, and after the hectic opening lap, the Triumphs settle down to their scheduled lap times. Sir Gawain Bailey's Lotus is already in trouble, but it's all right for some. And this is important. Number 33, Joe Bonnier, brings the fastest of the Works Porsches early into the pits, an omen of the troubles which are gradually to whittle away this strong German challenge. Now come the first of the routine refueling stops, and the Ferrari mechanics go to work on Bianchi's car of the Equipe Nationale of Belgium, which is destined to crash within the hour. At the end of the first 60 minutes, Maston Gregory and the Maserati have drawn away from the pursuing Ferraris. Briggs Cunningham's experimental Jaguar is out of the hunt, but Jim Clark and Roy Salvadori, with last year's winning Aston Martin, and Flockett and Halford with the Acoste Jaguar are up amongst the leaders. The other Belgian-entered Ferrari calls in for fuel. Ninian Sanderson now is all ready to go. And in come the leading Triumphs for their first refueling stop. Peter Bolton and Les Leston arrive simultaneously, but the pit staff is more than equal to the occasion, and the team moves swiftly and smoothly into action. With 25 laps completed before the first stop, in goes the engine oil. In 2 hours and 5 minutes, the Triumphs have covered 206 miles. Methodically, the official, flambeur in French, plumber in English, reseals the engine. Sanderson takes over from Bolton as Mike Rothschild gets into the race in Les Leston's car. Two up and one to play. Ken Richardson might look as if he's trying to fly, but there's no flap. Keith Balisat shoots in for fuel, oil, and water. And in a minute or two, we all get that. It fairly hisses down. With the rain, down comes the lap speeds. In seconds, the circuit becomes a skating rink, and what is at the best of times a hazardous race becomes a desperately dangerous undertaking. Ken Richardson decides to call the Triumphs in again to meet this challenge, and Marcel Beccard comes to the pit to be suitably shod for the wet. Of all the technical contributions which racing has made for the average motorist, the matter of tyre design may be the most important. Once again, poor Ninian Sanderson is doing his Le Mans the hard way, but the Triumph pitwork lives up to the British tradition of efficiency long established in this race. Mike Rothschild's turn now to frighten the team manager. And the race is running out of daylight. Meantime, the importance of pit work at Le Mans has been proved to the hilt by the Ferrari team. Incredible to relate, both the Hill von Tripps and the Scarfiotti Rodriguez works cars have been put out of the race by running out of fuel. Maston Gregory's Maserati has also lost an hour at the pits and is never to recover. But in the premature twilight, as Les Leston rejoins the race, the Triumph team is all present and correct against its own carefully calculated schedule. By 10 o'clock, the roads are drying out, and with the darkness comes the magic of Le Mans. Now, control of their drivers is maintained from the pits by signal light. Because of the confusion of light and activity in the main pit area, which at Le Mans is passed at up to 130 miles an hour, the drivers are signaled after Mulsanne Corner at the end of the 3-mile straight. It's an additional link in the chain of communication, and upon its efficiency, success or failure depend. That electronic scoreboard proved to be more spectacular than accurate, but the things that mattered seemed to work. Le Mans is much more than a motor race. It's an international institution, and after dark, that unique collection of sideshows and restaurants, exhibitions and dance halls known as La Village attract the thousands who make the weekend a holiday. But in the darkness, out on the circuit, the battle for the lead roars on between the British and Italian cars. Soon after dawn comes a bitter blow to British hopes. The D-type Jaguar of the Écurie Écosse, gallantly driven by Ron Flockett and Bruce Halford, breaks its crank when lying fourth, and the challenge to the Ferraris is left to the solitary Border Reivers Aston Martin. There are now only 35 cars running of the 55 that started. The big American Corvettes are just not fast enough for the leaders. They lie 10th and 15th, whereas the leading TR is 16th, and the Triumph showing in the 2-litre class is very impressive. Number 10, the Meres-Ginther works car, is third of the 3 Ferraris in the lead. Ninian Sanderson arrives for a late breakfast on a grey Sunday morning, and with 3/4 of the race completed at an average speed of 96 miles an hour, comes crisis in the Triumph pit. A last-minute modification to the engine design has led to trouble, and the big question is whether or not the motors will last out the final hours. To withdraw now, or to run on in the hope of finishing the race. There's no question of being able to rectify the fault at the pits. But the Triumph team and its management share the sporting approach of Triumph owners everywhere. Press on, but take it easy. We'll have a go. Meantime, the Triumph's foreign competitors in the 2-litre class are in bigger trouble. There's now only one Porsche left. Out on the circuit, Les Leston and the Meres-Ginther works Ferrari at Whitehouse. At the pits, Keith Balasat makes his routine stop, but now adds an anxious briefing on the car's performance to co-driver Marcel Beccard. That charming sportsman Beccard, long distinguished as one of France's most successful long-distance drivers, has victories in the Monte Carlo and RAC rallies to his credit, as well as previous class wins at Le Mans. What, he wonders, is to be the outcome this year? All 3 Triumphs are beset by precisely the same difficulty. At least itself an assurance that the fault will never occur again, and thereby, after all, justifying one of the fundamental objects of testing an experimental design to the ultimate at Le Mans. But this is cold comfort to the tired and disappointed driver, now facing the added responsibility of nursing a sick car to the finishing line. And that's the last you see of number 10. The Meresquintha Works Ferrari breaks its gearbox when lying third. Meantime, Peter Bolton proves there's life in the old clog yet. In the lead, as it has been now since the first 4 hours, the sole surviving Works Ferrari of Paul Frere and Jean de Vieux. At Terre Rouge, the surviving Porsche, Bailey's Aston lying 8th, and one of the string of GT Ferraris which dominate the race. The French-entered Lotus, number 44, on its way to a class victory, is running with the Triumphs. And there's the remains of that Belgian Ferrari which spun off in the wet, miraculously without hurting anybody. Number 2 is the Thompson-Windbridge Corvette, which, having scattered bits all around the circuit, finally blew up slap in front of the stands. And watch for number 15, Graham Whitehead's Ferrari, which came within an ace of winning the Grand Touring class. The Aston Martin of Roy Salvadori and Jim Clark now holds an unassailable 3rd place, but with little hope of catching the leading Ferraris, as the Belgian pair, Paul Frere and Olivier Gendebien, sweep on their superbly judged way at a steady 109-mile-an-hour average. Meantime, the Triumphs justify the confidence of the team. They too lap steadily on for mile after grueling mile. The leader at the pits, and always when this happens, there's an audible buzz of excitement. The managing director watches his men in the Triumph pit as the indefatigable Ken Richardson prepares for another routine stop. Marcel Beccard brings in number 28, running a lap behind the Bolton-Sanderson car and about the same distance ahead of Les Leston and Mike Rothschild. The common fuel supply is gravity-fed from the high-speed permanent installation, and with the wide-necked fillers designed for the race, refueling the TRs is a work of seconds. Mike Rothschild's turn now to come in for his 11s, and once again, the routine teamwork moves into action. In his first Le Mans, the young American is more than justifying his place in the team. And at no 24 hours... The surviving Belgian Ferrari now lies 5th and 2nd in the Grand Touring class. But amongst the tiddlers, the 750 Oscar is not quick enough for the French DBs. However, not to worry, ma'am. It'll be all right, you'll find. The remarkable Mexican Rodriguez has the North American entered Ferrari number 17 securely in 2nd place now, 3 laps behind the leader. They also serve. But jump to it, lads. Here we go again. Ninian Sanderson reports increased loss of power on the leading TR, but the regulations only allow 2 mechanics to work on a car at any one time. Sanderson and Bolton, both in the motor trade, presumably discuss second-hand prices. Genuine works car, only 2 owners carefully run in. An attractive proposition for the enthusiast. But wake up in the showroom, here comes another customer. Oh no, it's all right, it's one of ours. In case of doubt, take the plugs out. Is that must be a plug there for someone.
You're coming into it a lot slower. So you must be,
The Director of Engineering, Harry Webster, gets a first-hand account of the problem. The presence at the circuit of the men responsible for a car's manufacture is a certain step towards the finest possible performance on the road. Ninian Sanderson gets back into the race. Not only is the firm behind him, it's right there with him in the pits. Alec Dick, like Sir William Lyons and David Brown, doesn't send his team to Le Mans. He brings it with him. For the last time, Paul Frere sets off from the Ferrari pit. And again, the rising excitement of the crowd can literally be felt and heard about the circuit. The long arm of the law, which has presumably been appropriately bent at lunchtime, now hooks out towards the pits as 4 o'clock draws near. With only minutes now to go to the checkered flag, the Leston Rothschild TR, which had initially led the team, sets off from the pits for the last time. The Ferraris in close formation sweep on to their tremendous victory. Once again, the eyes of the motoring world focus upon the checkered flag of Le Mans, and every one of the 25 cars which cross that distinguished line has won itself a place in motoring history. 3 experimental versions of the Triumph TR started the race. 3 finished. Their leader, the Belisat-Becker car, has covered 2,150 miles in the 24 hours, and the vast crowds have seen the competition baptism of a new generation of triumphs, as distinguished as any of their illustrious forebears. To Les Leston and Mike Rothschild, Ninian Sanderson and Peter Bolton, Keith Belisat and Marcel Beccard, has come the distinction of being godparents at the ceremony. It but remains to wet the baby's head, and for that there will be many trained and willing helpers. Paul Frere and Olivier Jeanlebien become names written indelibly in the story of motor racing and the memories of those who witnessed Le Mans in 1960. None but the brave deserved the fair, and the triumphs have once again proved worthy of the finest drivers.